Welcome to another episode of Mind Matters, the talk program that provokes critical thinking, logic, and reason. We encourage all of our listeners to use their common sense in all of their decision making, especially if it involves an issue that you think is important or one that affects your liberties and God-given rights. Welcome back, listeners and viewers, to Mind Matters. This is the 35th episode with my co-host, Army veteran and mentor Dan Ploger. We're going to talk about gratitude today. You'll notice the backdrop is Team 1 Mile. What is gratitude? And I'm wearing the paraphernalia, their hat, and their nonprofit logo on this T-shirt. I just got back from Florida. Traveled 2,042 miles round trip in my Jeep to get there as a support team member of 13 incredible athletes who did 700 miles around the state of Florida, visiting American Legions and VFW posts to give honor to a veteran, but also to pay homage to the survivors of Hurricane Ian, which we all know devastated many lives last year in the state of Florida, and we didn't want the world to forget. So Dan had the opportunity to visit us in Bradenton, Florida at the event that we did there. We're going to talk about that, but just wanted to say a couple things before we get started is that when you drive 2,042 miles in a Jeep, that's a feat in and of itself, but you have a lot of opportunity to reflect. And so, what I witnessed in those 6 days was nothing but short of incredible. But also I saw genuine gratitude extended for which many times are unsung heroes and people we tend to forget. The storm comes, media shows up, and then, a month later they're gone. And the people that are there whose lives were devastated are left to pick up, their lives again. And we don't want to forget those people. And we want to thank the first responders, law enforcement personnel, and law enforcement agencies who, of course, that's what they get paid to do. But in reality, it's those individuals that are members of those organizations that help out when people are in need the most. And also the veterans. We're always remembering the veterans, but even still, we need to continue that mission. And Team 1 Mile is doing exactly that. And to see the looks on some of these veterans' faces when we gave them recognition. And before I forget, Marine Major General Mark Lott and his wife Roseanne were phenomenal. They brought $10,000 or more of rescue survival emergency kits to each American Legion and VFW that we visited. Generator and all kinds of shovels and sandbags and first aid kits and chainsaws and all the things that people need during an emergency situation like a hurricane. So kudos to them. That was extraordinary to watch. The VFW post commanders and quartermasters were beside themselves. And it was just, we're going to discuss that. What is gratitude? So Dan, my co-host and partner in audio and visual crime, so to speak, is here again, thank God. And as a Vietnam veteran, what did you witness, Dan? Give us your sentiments or your observations from what you saw in Bradenton. It was good to see you, by the way. I haven't seen you in a couple of years, so.
Likewise, John. No, the link, I think, of these groups of people, the first responders, the veterans, and the connection between the people who are actually putting on the show and managing the entire trip, 600 some mile trip, and the residents of the VFW Hall in Bradenton. It was great to see this coming together. And then let's add the police escort coming into the VFW area parking lot. Those policemen are also part of the first responder, part of the honorees of this effort. And I was just very much impressed with. It's fun to be part of a group. I don't go around identifying as a war veteran, but when it is brought up and you're in the company of others, it's a nice place to be.
Yeah, I concur, and I'm glad that you were able to see, what Team One Mile was doing. Want to congratulate Mike Campbell, who's the co-founder of Team One Mile, and that he was the brainchild behind this to put together a team of supporters and a team of really hardcore riders, cyclists. Learned a lot. So we visited the Naval Air Station in Key West, which is where we started, and then I was not on the bike, but they rode over 140 miles to the Homestead American Legion Post 43. Excuse me if I can't remember all the numbers. Had a police escort into there, and then Cooper Creek. They moved on to Fort Lauderdale, West Palm, and then down to Cooper Creek, Post 321, I believe, and I don't have all my notes here. And then they rode in a vehicle across to get some rest and over to Cape Coral and the VFW post there. Actually, it was American Legion in Cooper City, and then the first lines of defense or help that people got was in Cape Coral, and Mark Lott and his wife left a care package there, so to speak, and then they had a 25-mile riders, combat veteran riders group of Harley Davidson ride out of that location on up to Bradenton. We stopped at a Firehouse Subs in Venice. We were treated very nice there. And then in the Bradenton, Dan, where we saw you, got some rest, and then they rode across the state to Orlando. The VFW on South Goldenrod there, we left supplies there, and then visited the Firehouse Subs there, and were treated very nicely by their crew, phenomenal people at Firehouse Subs. And then they rode across, and we followed, of course, over to Daytona Beach and then Port Orange and the VFW there. Next morning, got back up, headed off to St. Augustine, where they visited the barracks right downtown, the old part of St. Augustine, and gathered some riders from the Wounded Warrior Foundation, which continued the mission all the way into Jacksonville, where there was a police escort, and in our final presentation there. So I tried to recap it very quickly, but one thing sticks out in my mind. Actually, a bunch of things do, but Dan Davey, who was one of the cyclists, former Green Bay Packers player, defensive end or defensive tackle, who played for Wisconsin, go Badgers. He rode with his father's picture in a Green Bay jacket. He also played for the Jaguars too, which is where he ended his career, stopped his career. But his father in a Green Bay Packers jacket was right in between the armrests on his bicycle, and the video that caught my eye was his video with a picture of his father, who was a Marine, and his brother was a Marine when they were leaving Key West, and then on to the team, and then up to this huge American flag. And right off the bat, that was just a phenomenal depiction of what this was all about, and the determination and the grit. And something that Don said the night before we started was this about gratitude. Basically, it's important that we extend it, but it doesn't come naturally. You have to really be conscious to let somebody, you have to work at being grateful, and you have to let people know how you truly feel about them, whether it's in person or by phone. And so he said, when you're thinking about gratitude, we've heard that commercial before, just do it. Make the conscious effort to do it, but do it because you mean it. It's one thing giving somebody, a gold star for participating, but it's another thing when you give it to them out of the sincerity of your heart. And I witnessed that gratitude hundreds and hundreds of times in 6 days. I'd never been surrounded by so much gratitude. And that in itself, with the gratitude professor was there, our friend Edward Pereira. But that in itself is exactly what Team One Mile's mission was, to extend gratitude. Let me ask you this, Dan, because I know you're grateful for so many things. What does it mean to you? What does gratitude mean to you?
Be thankful to others. What they've done is a way of honoring them, but also recognizing in your own mind a level of humility and acceptance from assistance from others. So, like forgiveness, it has very little to do with thank you, Mr. Policeman, or thank you, Mr. Soldier. It has more to do with what's going on in your own head, and it's a healthy thing.
Well said, Dan. One of the recipients of the Gratitude Professor Team One Sport Eagle Award, who served his country, was a fella over in Port Orange named Bill Madison. Bill enlisted in the Army, went to Korea, and then shortly thereafter, they diagnosed him with epilepsy. And needless to say, he had to come back home. William Bill Madison. And we made the presentation, made the award. Of course, the Morton brothers were there with awesome music. And we were told that Bill Madison was so touched that he literally cried all the way home from the event location to his personal residence. And that's another thing that stuck to me too, is that to make that much of an impact in somebody's life and to be part of that makes every ounce of effort it makes it worth it. Even if we were to just make one veteran cry on this whole trip, and I'm sure there was misty eyes in a lot of places, that in and of itself made the world a better place. And we hear about that and how cliche that sounds. Let's make the world a better place. But when you see it in action, when you see these incredible athletes and community members extend that kind of gratitude and mean it, you can't help but think we did something right, something good in the world. And with so much going on, and I got to tell you, Dan, I'm grateful for you, man. We've been partners or friends for the last 7 years, and we met at a guitar playing class, and I miss you, brother. We used to play, we were starting to get good. And then, I moved up here to Virginia, but I tell you here, unabashedly, I'm glad you showed up. I'm glad you got to see what Team 1 Mile was doing, and I'm thankful for your friendship. Pretty deep, man. And all along the whole journey, I was remembering veterans who I know personally who are no longer with us. And I'm sure that many people out there, we hear about the 22, probably higher than that take their own lives every day. And we did 22 push-ups at the St. Augustine Barracks. And that's another thing, think about people in your life, veteran, first responder, law enforcement, fire department, family member, who you're grateful for. And if you could take a moment, if you're not in contact with them, pick up the phone, hear it all the time from the Gratitude Professor. Pick up the phone, extend some gratitude. Richard Caruso is like another king of gratitude. He's the guy that got me involved. Marine, U.S. Marine, and he extended gratitude everywhere he went. And we so to all the unsung heroes out there, you mean a lot. Want to thank Mike Campbell for allowing me the privilege, and you mentioned it, Dan, the humility to be part of something like this, and thank all the people who pulled together when times got tough to make this journey happen and to have success, and to be able to extend from your own hearts the gratitude that we're talking about here today. Anything in closing, Dan?
Nothing further. It's just a wonderful experience and a heartwarming experience for me, and I trust it was for everybody else. And boy, my hat goes off to to everybody, the organizers behind that, but also the athletes themselves. As a person who was once an athlete and now can only remember those times, again, there's a sense of gratitude for just being in good condition and being a good human being. I really just like to be around people like that.
And that you are, and thank you for that, Dan. And Team 1 Mile's moniker, if you will, is changing lives 1 mile at a time. And they certainly did that. If you want more information about them, you can go to team1mile.com and check out what they're doing. I know that Mike, the founder's already got plans for something else soon. So anyhow, Dan, thank you for being here and being my co-host these past several years. And thank you, listeners and viewers, for watching the Mind Matters show, where authentic conversation rules the day. And we appreciate you too. We're grateful for you. So thank you. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Mind Matters. Remember, your mind matters, but only if you use it. Stay alert, stay alive, keep your eyes wide open.